we recording? Yeah, it's in progress, and then I'm going to chime in periodically. All right, Steph, go ahead.
All right, so we'll get started. My name is Sarah Burns-Feyl, and I'm one of the reference librarians here at PACE. And I think everybody got the handout, right? I think I got everybody who came in. If you have any questions after tonight, the most important thing for you to know is that my name and email address is on the top of that handout. Please feel free to ask me questions after tonight. I'm going to give you a little, it's going to be a little whirlwind, maybe a little quick, but I think you're going to get the idea of how to use this tool that we have. Has anybody used Simmons before? One person. Everyone's going to ask you for help because they're not going to want to come to me, right?
Here's what we're trying to do. When you go into the workforce and you're working professionally, you're going to find that in the first 3 or 4 years, if you're in any kind of a marketing capacity, about maybe a third of you to half of you are going to find a need to use it. And some of you are going to find a need to direct a supplier or a vendor who's using it. For the other half of you, there's a high probability that you'll have to access another database, not Simmons, but something else. And everybody that's ever graduated here has told me when I've had conversations with them that their experience learning how to do Simmons here made it so much easier for them to access conceptually similar databases from other sources in their job. And most jobs require you, particularly in the first 4 or 5 years, to access data on the industry or on the prospects or consumers, and they all have to share the same kind of conceptual algorithm, if you will, or steps to do so. And by mastering this, they don't even have to master, just getting comfortable with it, you're going to find any new database that presents itself to you, you'll find it much easier. So that's why this is really important.
Good. All right. So Simmons is, since only one person has used it, we'll start with the basics. What is Simmons? So Simmons is a consumer, well, it's a company that runs a consumer survey in the United States on an annual basis. So they conducted a survey on paper still. It's a booklet. It's a very thick booklet. And they mail the booklet out. The data set that we currently have is from April 2019 through early June 2020. So getting into the COVID lockdown time, this is the data set we have. So in this particular study from 2019 to 2020, which is called the 2020 study, 25,365 people around the United States took the survey. So people 18 and older complete the survey. It's conducted in every state except Alaska and Hawaii. Like I said, it's conducted on paper. It's a thick booklet. One of my colleagues, actually, her husband received it in, I think, 2021. And he did not complete the survey. So they mailed him a second booklet with a $5 bill in it as incentive to please complete the survey. And if he had completed it and returned it, he would have gotten a $40 Amazon gift card. So that's the compensation that people get for completing this survey. So what's on the survey? I actually shared some documents with Dr. Chigurh last week that I believe he has shared with you or will share with you. And you're going to have this methodology document, which explains how they sample, how they decide who to survey. So you're going to have that very long document that you can skim and read. And then I sent him this document, which is actually part of the survey from 2020, and it's called the household part of the survey. So there are questions on the survey. So, one person fills it out, but some of the questions they answer on behalf of the entire household. So things like, does anyone in your household eat bread? Yes or no? If yes, what type? If yes, what brand? What brand of bread do you eat most often? So these are the kinds of questions that are on the survey. So that's the household survey. There's another part of the survey, which is called the personal survey. And that file is so large that I wasn't able to send it. You can access it, and the directions to do that are right at the top of this handout. So you could pull up this same document. And this personal part of the survey, this contains all of the demographic questions. So you can see there's things like sex, age, race, marital status, level of education, your employment status. This is the survey from 2020. What language is spoken in your home? What religion? Then you start to get into activities. Then you get into media consumption. So this survey has demographic questions, right? Age, race, gender, level of education, household income, demographic questions. It has product usage questions, brand questions. It asks questions about your daily activities, your hobbies, do you travel? All those questions are on the survey. And then there are these media consumption questions. So people who take the survey are asked, do you read one of the national newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post, etc. And then there's a whole section of the survey about the internet. What activities do they do? What kinds of websites do they visit? How often do they visit these kinds of websites? They even give them a list of websites to actually check off. I mean, it's got to be like 1/1,000,000th of all the websites in the world, but they still give them a list, which is, I don't know, I find it odd. They also ask them what magazines they read, in print or digital. So they're asked about media consumption. They're also asked about what, this is so nice. Thanks, you've made it through the first section of the survey. Keep going. It's like they're trying to cheer them on. They're asked about what cable channels they watch. They do finally have questions about streaming services. So demographic questions, product usage questions, brand usage questions, activity questions, media consumption questions. And then in addition to all of these questions on the survey, they also attempt to measure people's attitudes and opinions about things. And these are called psychographics. So at the end of this document, this is a sampling of some of the attitude statements that are put on the survey. So things like, money is the best measure of success. I worry a lot about myself. And then they have to check if they agree a lot, agree a little, disagree a lot, right? So they have to check off for these statements. So there's this general category of attitudes and opinions, and then there are additional categories. Pardon me, the environment, technology, lifestyle and the internet, personal finance, diet and health. They're asked about food, travel, media. So all of these attitude statements are on the survey, and people have to check if they agree or disagree. So basically what we have access to the data set from the 2020 survey. So over 25,000 people took the survey. We can go in and see what were their answers. So not individuals, obviously, but aggregate data. We have access to this data set. So based on what these 25,000 or so people said on the survey, we can learn about adults in the United States, consumers. And we can learn about them using this tool and then use that to figure out how to reach them, how to craft message. Now, why do we have 2020 data and not more recent? This is the most recent data set they will sell in academic institution. Their corporate clients have much more recent data than we have. But that's okay, because you're learning how to use this kind of tool. Maybe if you were working on a project and the company, it's like a brand new product that has only been in existence for a year, well, yeah, then it's not going to be on the Simmons survey from 3 years ago. But this kind of project that you're working on, it's okay that the data is a couple of years old.
Is this fall 2020?
It goes through June of 2020.
Spring to spring field.
Yep.
It goes spring and fall. There's two fields. They interviewed 12,500 people in the fall and 12,500 people in the spring. They don't interview them in the summer. I don't know why. Because the people were not response rates.
People won't do it in the summer. Yeah. You need to pay them more than $45, I suppose, or $40 Amazon. It's not even cash, it's an Amazon gift card. So what we can do in Simmons, the most basic thing, pardon me, except that it's actually pretty complex. The most standard thing that we do in Simmons is we build something that's called a cross tabulation. It's basically a big table. So we are going to go into Simmons. We're going to put things in columns. We're going to put things in rows. And then we're going to run this cross tabulation. It's going to produce a big report that we're going to export into Excel. And we're going to be able to interpret the data in this table. We're going to put, the way I like to think of it, we're going to put people in columns. The people we're interested in learning about. Who are you interested in learning about depends on your product, your brand, your target. Do you have an age range you're looking at? Do you have someone who has children? Is that your target? Who are you thinking about? Who do you want to learn about? That's when you start asking yourself, okay, what am I going to put in columns? Think of each column as a group of people. And you define that column with how those people answered a question on the survey. So this is the main interface that we land on. This is the crosstab interface. And this list on the left, this menu here, is called the dictionary. Okay. And I wish these little arrows were folder icons because they're folders. Each of these folders contains the questions on the survey that were in that category. So you can see there's food, there's beverages, there's travel, there's internet, there's cable television, there's pet products. So all the questions that were on the survey are organized in these folders here in the dictionary. So we can open these up. So say, for example, that you are interested in a certain age range. The demographic questions are in the lifestyle demographics folder. And then we can go to demographics, personal information. And now you can see we're down to the question level. So these questions were on the survey: gender, age, race, level of education, marital status. Are you a college student? So all of these demographic questions are here. We can build columns based on how people answered these questions or what ranges they may fall in these questions. Now we can also create columns based on how people answered questions about products or brands. So for example, if we go to beverages, non-alcoholic drinks, you can see that there are some categories there that might be of interest to you. So there's coffee drinks, bottled or canned, right? They were asked about that. Coffee on the go, out of home. We can see espresso and cappuccino. We can see ground or whole bean coffee. We can see instant coffee, iced tea. I was curious. I feel like I want to go in here and find out if they ask about iced coffee, except for the frappuccino thing. Like iced tea is here, but remember in this afternoon,
Right.
we were talking about iced coffee versus hot coffee and what people drink. And I didn't see anything in here about iced coffee. So I'm curious. I'm going to dig around in there and see what I can find.
We did it the other class. I'm not sure if we did it in this class. When Noreen McGuire was here, did we ask you all if you drink hot coffee versus cold coffee? So how many of you drink hot coffee? Raise your hand. One. How many of you drink cold coffee? So you would want that. You drink both.
And put some hot cocoa in your hot coffee and it's like a mocha. So do that too.
But this is the young generation, maybe the American public at large, hot coffee still rules the day. But you would think they would include a cold coffee question.
Yeah, I feel like I need to dig around in here and see if I can figure out, are they asking about iced? I didn't see it anywhere in all my searching for the word coffee. So that's intriguing because that's where it's a good combination of this kind of data with the kind of research that Noreen showed you, that you can go in and search articles and find research reports about people drinking iced coffee versus hot coffee. So both kinds of research are valuable. Okay, so we're in this folder, beverages, non-alcoholic, and you can see there are all these subfolders. So perhaps one of them we might be interested in is ground or whole bean coffee. So there was a question on the survey. And if I click on this question, it says ground or whole bean coffee HH uses. So they kind of abbreviate the questions. So this question was, does your household drink ground or whole bean coffee? Use ground or whole bean coffee? Yes or no were the possible answers, right? So that appears here in the middle frame. So we can learn about all the people who said, yes, we drink coffee, or we use ground or whole bean coffee in our house. We can learn about all the people who said yes. We can drag those people over to a column. Okay, now we can learn about all the people. Maybe we want to compare the people who said no, we don't use ground or whole bean coffee. So we can drag the answer, which kind of represents all the people who chose that answer. We can drag them over to the columns. So here we now see these samples. So what this means is 16,145 people who took the survey said, yes, our household uses ground or whole bean coffee. 8,789 people said no to that question. So maybe we want to, learn about these two groups of people based on how they answered that question. Are they the same? Are they different? We don't know, right? But that's what the survey data can start to tell us. Now, something else you might be thinking about already is, well, what about brands or, other things? So there are more specific questions. There's, oh, maybe this is where it is. So they were asked about types of ground coffee, which is like caffeinated or decaf. Forms, ground, single serve, whole bean. Kinds, flavored or unflavored. I thought maybe this is where the iced or the hot would be, because they did ask them some more specific questions. They do also ask them about brands. So these people answered that question. Does your household use ground or whole bean coffee? Yes. If yes, which brand do you use most often is the MO. So maybe we're interested in learning about the people who said that they use Starbucks most often. We can drag that answer over to a column and put all those people who chose that answer in a column. So 2,395 people said Starbucks was the brand they use most often. Okay. So the weighted, you add 3 zeros. So what this means is, so these 2,395 people who said they use Starbucks most often, that represents 26 million people in the United States. So a potential, potential market of 26 million people who would use ground or whole bean coffee with the Starbucks brand. So that's the most simple way that you can define a group of people in a column. You can go in, find the question you're interested in, identify, which answers, which people you want to learn about based on how they answered the question. And you just drag the answer over here to the column. And now it's built that column. Now, the other thing that you can do, which some of you might be thinking of this already, is, well, that's great. All these people said they drink coffee, but maybe we want to break that down by gender, males versus females. Maybe they behave differently, right? We don't know. That's what the survey would tell us. Or maybe we want to say, okay, that's 16,000 or so people said they drink coffee, but I'm only interested in the 18 to 24-year-olds who said, yes, they drink coffee. So what we can do is we can create a column based on how people answered 2 or more questions. So our sample will get smaller, right? So we're basically going to tell Simmons, okay, this 16,145 people who said, yes, we drink coffee, I'm only interested in the people who are 18 to 24, who also answered that question that way. So I'm going to go to lifestyle demographics, right? We looked at this really briefly. Demographics, personal information, and then I'm going to go to age. And these, what you get when you click on age is, for the most part, you get age ranges, or they're basically pretty standardized age ranges that are used in marketing and marketing research. So you can see there's all different combinations here of the different age ranges. The most typical are 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, etc.
But Simmons does break out 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds and 20. They break out the lowest age.
18, 19, 20, and 21.
So if you want to look at the let's say the younger folks versus older folks in the cohort, there's a way of doing that. Could they take the 18 to 24-year-olds and then remove the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds so that they're only looking at the 21 to 24-year-olds? I think so, right?
You could, yes, you could, or the 21 to 22 to 24-year-olds.
Okay.
Because 22, 23, and 24 are not available as single years.
Because here's the thing.
Yeah.
Why you remember this? An 18-year-old is nothing like a 24-year-old. Generally. You know that. You know what I'm talking about. Right? You can't say the same about a 38-year-old versus a 44-year-old. Or a 48-year-old versus a 54-year-old. 18-year-old versus a 24-year-old. There's usually a big difference. Just as an 18-year-old male is nothing like a 24-year-old female. Females are different, but 18, 24 is really different. Because it's a matter of you 24-year-olds are generally, they're in their post-graduate, post-college career. They're in the real world, so to speak. Not that you're not, but they really are. They're generally creating their own way. So it's a big difference. So when you think about the 18 and 24-year-olds, it's a very challenging cohort because marketers treat them all as one lump sum, one cohort. but they're really not. So there may be opportunities within to be focusing on one particular age group or gender that is more important than another.
So if we wanted to learn about all the 18 to 24-year-olds who took the survey, we can just drag that age range over and put them in a column. And this is important. So only 1,820 people total aged 18 to 24 took the survey in 2020. It doesn't seem small, but out of 25,000 or more people, like that's it, 1,800 people who were 18 to 24. So if we're going to break this down even further, the samples are going to get even smaller. So that's just something to keep in mind. Yeah, if you're really thinking about 18 to 24-year-olds, you're starting with only 1,820 people in your sample, because only 1,820 people who took the survey are in that age range. So that's kind of that's important, that it's not like 10,000 of them took the survey in 2020. So, all right, but so now what we could do, so we've got these 16,000 people who said they drink coffee. We've got 1,800 people who are age 18 to 24. Let's see how many of these people are in the I drink coffee group. Maybe that's what we want to do. So to create a column based on the answers to more than one question, we have to use this box down here in the bottom. It's called the coding box. And this is where we will build our search statement, basically. And you can do it either way. You can drag from this middle box, the answer box, which we've been doing. We've been dragging over to columns. You can also drag from the columns down to the coding box. So let's drag the 18 to 24-year-olds down to the coding box. And now we have to choose our search word, basically. And in this case, the search word is and. So it's right above the box. And you can see when I click on and, the box turns red. So it's kind of telling me you're not done yet. You have to put something else here. So let's drag those coffee drinkers down to the coding box, and now it's green. So that means that it's good. We can, I guess that's fine. We can change the column heading if we want to here. These are so long, but that might be all right to just leave it. So now we need to get those people up into a column. We can't just drag it, but there's this little button that looks like columns right there. And if we hover over it, it says move to columns. So we can move those people to columns. So 1,023 people said they were age 18 to 24 and they use ground or whole bean coffee in their household. That's not bad. That's actually, it's a pretty good sample size. So, but if you think about this sample, right, we had 16,145. So out of those people, 1,023 of them are 18 to 24 years old. Questions about what and does, or how you combine things to create a column based on more than one question? Now, yes, you could say, oh, I want to do 18 to 24, and we use ground or whole bean coffee, and male. And then you're going to do 18 to 24, and yes, and female. You could do that, but your sample will be less than 1,023, right? Because you're basically going to divide that number between the male and the females, the people who chose those on the survey. So you can and together 2, 3, 4 questions, but your sample will get smaller and smaller because the people in that column have to meet all those criteria. So that's just, keep your eye on your sample size. You get down, 200, 300, even 400 or 500, sometimes the sample becomes too small when we run the cross tabulation. So, so yes, you can and more than 2, just so you have that in your mind. So the other thing that you could do, especially for this particular project, we do have the option of using or. So the 18 to 24 set, these people, this is actually an or search. It's 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 or 22 or 23 or 24. So it's basically telling Simmons either of those. You or them together, you get a bigger set. You could, since Simmons has given us 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds, you could create a set of just those 4 ages. So we could do that using the coding box. Simmons has given us the 22 to 24-year-olds separately, but we don't have them all individually. So we could do that. We could say 18 or 19 or 20 or 21. And now if we move those to columns, we can see that's 1,080 of the 18 to 24-year-olds. So the 22 to 24-year-olds, which we can anticipate, is smaller, 740. So you see the difference between or and? So it's just kind of, you have to understand they do opposite things. They're useful. They're both useful. I think usually you use and a lot more often. And something that's important, can I just, something that's important is, and I'm going to drag this or statement back down here. Say we wanted to do 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 and yes, coffee. You have to put this in parentheses, and they give us the little parentheses right here. So we put the starting, put our cursor there, open parentheses, now it's at the end, close parentheses, and yes to coffee. So we can say 1821 coffee. Move to columns. So we had to tell Simmons, do this first, do the ors, build this set. And then from that set, and yes, we drink coffee. So do you see how you have to just, if you're just oring some things together to create a column, you don't need the parentheses. But if you're going to then try and something in with that set, you do need to put the or part of it in parentheses.
You're gonna find out what we don't know, what this means here.
Yeah, the XOR, I can never remember. I looked it up. I don't use it, so I'll look it up and send you what
So
that is.
after Sarah's thing, I'll explain a little bit more about the and statement, how we can use it to focus on the sweet spot in the chart. And we'll say that further. Go ahead.
Questions about and or? I know it's a little abstract still. We haven't actually built a, run our cross tabulation. All right, so we've identified some groups of people. And when you're thinking about your, what to put in columns, something to think about is, groups that you might want to compare. So like we said, the people who said yes to coffee and the people who said no to coffee. Maybe we would want to have, we put the Starbucks people here, right? The Starbucks users. Maybe we would want to compare the Starbucks users with the Dunkin' users with the Seattle's Best Coffee users, put 4 or 5 of the top brands, put each of those people into a column, and you could learn about the people who use the different brands. But it's helpful if you're thinking about comparing one group to the other, when you're kind of envisioning who you're going to put in your columns, or which groups you're going to put in your columns. So we've got a bunch of columns, so I think we're in good shape for columns for now. Now let's talk about what do we put in the rows. So we put in the rows, basically, what do we want to learn about these people that we've put in columns? And one of the first things that a lot of people do is they want to learn about, the people's attitudes and opinions. So remember there was that section of the survey I showed you with all the statements, and they had to check if they agree or disagree. So all those statements are here in the lifestyle statements folder. So we can decide which category are we interested in. There's the environment, there's food, there's personal finance, social interaction, social media. Let's do social media, why not? So we open up the attitude folder. And at this point, we're at the question level, but they're not really questions. They're the points on the scale, right? The agree a lot, agree a little, etc. Many times we start with any agree. So that's everybody who agreed a lot and everybody who agreed a little. Now, there may be times where you would rather finesse it and only look at the agree a lots. Like you really want the people who are very clearly agreeing with this statement. And I think Dr. Shigaris can talk to you more about that. But it's typical that we usually start with any agree. So if I click on any agree, it puts all those statements, right? We saw that page in the survey. It puts all those statements in the box here in the middle. So now we need to get each of these statements down into a row. You don't have to drag them individually. Simmons knows we want to do this. So we can actually drag the question. So over here in the dictionary, I can drag the any agree over to the rows, and it dropped each one of those statements into a row. Okay. So now we've got our columns, we've got our rows, and now we can run our cross tabulation. So there's this arrow up at the top, and we click on run. So this is the cross tab. This is the table. You can see there's a scroll bar here. We can scroll left and right and see all the columns that we created. There's a scroll bar here. We know there's a whole list of statements there. This is really hard to look at and to read and to interpret. You also can't save it in this format. The only way that you can save this and use it offline and share it with your team members or with colleagues is to export it into Excel. So the menu on the left, you have to open up export and then click export into Excel.
This is really important, folks, because you don't want to do all this work and then forget to export it, then have to go back and recreate it.
Right.
You don't want to do that.
And I think as soon as you run that crosstab, the first thing you should do is export it into Excel and save it to your computer. Because what if the Wi-Fi goes down? What if the internet goes down? What if Simmons crashes, and you're kind of just in there browsing around in the crosstab in Simmons? I say, you did all that work to create your columns, grab that and save it to your computer. If you decide not to use this crosstab, just delete it. It's fine, right? Okay, so it's a little small. Let's zoom in so that we can read this. So we'll zoom in, and I'm also going to wrap text in that first column. Let's open this up. All right, so now we can really see. You see those numbers pretty well in the back? So these are our columns we created, right? Those all look pretty familiar. Here we have these are rows, and then we have all this data. So the numbers, the data in each cell or each section of this data will tell us how likely is it the people in the column agreed with the statement in the row. So we're going to be able to see, are there similarities, are there differences between these groups and how they each reacted to those statements on the survey. Now, this very first column is labeled total. And this is how we know the 25,365 sample, that's the total number of people who took the survey. And these numbers we saw, right? These samples we saw when we created each of those columns across the top. So we see those numbers there. The first number that we start to look at to start and interpret this data is the index. And each row has an index section. So you can see this, right? And it has these arrows, green arrows, yellow arrows, sometimes red arrows. Oh, we're not getting any red. All right, all these people, wow, all right, no red. We'll run another crosstab, don't worry. So this first column, like I said, this is everybody, everyone who takes the survey. The index is always 100. Think of that as the middle. Anything indexing over 100 means that the people in the column are more likely than the rest of the population to agree with the statement in the row, okay? So above 100, and you usually get a green arrow, it's kind of telling you, okay, this one's up there above 100, it's interesting. Below 100 means the people in the column are less likely than the rest of the population to agree with the statement in the row. And then you see these yellow arrows that are side to side, kind of on their sides. These numbers, so for example, like 99, it's below 100, but it's not a red arrow. 103, it's above 100, but it's not a green arrow. There's math going on behind this that Simmons does, and they're kind of determining, okay, which of these are interesting. And when it's so close to 100, they deem it not as interesting because it's just so close to the middle, to the average. So they want to kind of draw your attention to the ones that are more interesting. So they do that with the green arrows and the red arrows, except we're not actually getting any red arrows. But that's fine. There are some below 100, so that's all right. So like I was saying, so we could start to compare groups, right? We've got our coffee drinkers and our non-coffee drinkers. We've got our 18 to 21-year-olds and our 22 to 24-year-olds. So there, again, this is why you think about who are you interested in, what groups will you put in columns, so that when you run your crosstab like this, you can now start to look at them side by side and kind of learn about these groups of people. So let's see. So columns J and K. So these are the 18 to 21-year-olds. These are the 22 to 24-year-olds. I'm curious if here's one where they're different. I sometimes post ratings or reviews online for other consumers to read. The 18 to 21-year-olds are indexing at 103. So really kind of average. They are only 3% more likely to agree with that statement.
Which is nothing.
Right.
No different than anybody else.
But the 22 to 24-year-olds are indexing at 120.
That's a big difference.
So they are 20% more likely than the rest of the population to agree. I sometimes post ratings or reviews online for other consumers to read. So you start to see, how are these groups the same, different? You start to learn, how can I reach these people? What messaging can I use? So you're really, this is one of the ways you can use Simmons, is to look at these attitude and opinion statements and start to learn about these groups of people that you're trying to reach or you're trying to get insight into. Let's take a look at another one. Boy, these are all, everyone's really high indexing on a lot of these, except for the very beginning, the yes and the no coffee drinkers, but they're also very similar, which is very interesting because I would have thought people who said, yes, my household drinks coffee would be very different from people who said, no, my household does not drink coffee. But running this crosstab against this particular set of statements about social media, they react very similarly to these statements. So, okay, maybe I made an assumption about people who say, yes, we drink coffee versus people who say, no, we don't drink coffee. But the data is telling me that they're actually not that very different. So you might have assumptions or, conceptions you have about certain groups of people, but the data might tell you otherwise. It might also confirm something that you assume or know about groups of people. But it's the data that you can rely on. Like, I can't go to a client and say, oh, well, people who drink coffee are very different from people who don't drink coffee in terms of social media attitudes, when the survey's telling me that's not true. So that's the kind of, that's how you can start to think about these crosstabs and these data points. So the other number, questions about index, above 100, below, we're not seeing any red in this particular one, but you do see that there are numbers here below 100. So for example, the 97. So this group, these are the coffee drinkers, they are 3% less likely than the rest of the population to agree. I trust product information I get from social media sites more than other sources. They don't really, right? They're below, but they're both so close to 100. Questions about index? So the other two numbers, did you want to say anything?
Sounds good.
Oh, feels like you're ready to jump in. The other two numbers we look at are vertical percent and horizontal percent. So here's vertical percent and here's horizontal percent. Let's do one that's a shorter statement. Let's do this one. I often post or comment on social media sites. All right, vertical percent and horizontal percent. So vertical percent, we're thinking about the people on the vertical. That's kind of how you start your thought or your statement. So in this case, here's 29.2%. So who's the vertical of this one? These are the, I forget, 18 to 21-year-olds? 22 to 24-year-olds. All right, so J and K, looking at J and K. All right, so the 22 to 24-year-olds are in K. So of all the 22 to 24-year-olds who took the survey, 29.2% of them agreed I often post or comment on social media sites. So another way you could say that is 29.2% of 22 to 24-year-olds agree I often post or comment on social media sites. So that's vertical percent. Horizontal, it's just the opposite. You start with what's on the horizontal. So horizontal is 5.9%. So of all the people who took the survey who agree I often post or comment on social media sites, 5.9% are 22 to 24-year-olds. Or you could say it, 5.9% of all the people who agree I often post on social media sites are 22 to 24 years old. Questions? Vertical and horizontal, it's a little tougher to wrap your brain around them, but you get used to it. Once you do it like over and over again, index seems a little more straightforward compared to vertical and horizontal percent. Questions about that?
I have a question about
Yeah.
that. So do we have to include the vertical and horizontal in our presentations? Like, is that something?
Let me just make it clear. There's one associate that's one of these. Thank you. You don't do anything. Here's what you have to do. The last slide of the 4 or 5 slides I sent you with the 25-minute presentation I made here a few weeks ago. You have to convince me that your insight
Okay.
is
But it's not like
basically.
we have to say this is a vertical and this is horizontal.
You just have to
Okay.
find the data, find the evidence
Okay.
to make me believe you that your insight, that I should buy it.
Okay.
If I buy your insight, then I buy your message. If I buy your message, then I'm more likely to buy your organizing idea that is meant to deliver that message. If I don't buy your insight, your whole thing falls. And the only way you can sell me on it is through research. And so the best research you can grab, unless you're going to do your own survey, which won't be as good as Simmons, but it could be better if you ask the right questions. It's Simmons. It's a wonderful, it's a rich source of information on your target audience. Now, I will say one thing. In your electronic binder, which sometimes students make mistakes on, I want to see everything that you use to base your insight on. So if you base it on Simmons, I don't need to see all your Simmons runs, but the Simmons run that was the basis of your data point that you use to build to your insight. I want to see that. I want to highlight it in yellow. I don't want to have to look hard to find it. I don't want to have to look hard to find the Simmons run, and I don't want to look hard to find the number that you dropped in your presentation, which you're using to convince me about some part of your creative strategy.
Good. All right. Other questions about index, vertical, or horizontal percent? All right. So this is just one crosstab, right? So that crosstab was based on that set of columns and that particular group of lifestyle statements. If I exit out of Excel, I go back here to Simmons. I want to go back to that main page. To get back to the main page where you build your columns and your rows from here, there's this button at the top. There's one that says composer, and then the other one says dictionary. You want to click on dictionary. Pardon me. So remember, we said that this list is called the dictionary. So that's how you come back to this page. So maybe we're done with this set of lifestyle statements. You can just click the little X, clear all the rows. Now maybe we want to put something else into rows. So what else do we want to learn about these people? Maybe we want to look at some of their media consumption. So if we go to cable, television, and radio, we can see that there are questions about cable television and premium channels. And there was a question, okay, which cable channel did you watch in the last 7 days? And when we click on that, we can see now we get a list of cable channels. So we can drag the question over into the rows, and it will throw all those cable channels into the rows. So now we've got the same columns, same group of people in the columns, but this time what we're learning about them is how likely is it that they watch each of these cable channels. So I'm going to click on the arrow to run the crosstab. And what do I do next? What's the first thing you should do?
Save it.
Save it, export it. Yep, export it into Excel because you don't want to lose your work, right? All right, so it's here in Excel. All right, and we'll zoom in. Right, back to text. All right, so our columns are still there. There's the same, right? We've got our 18 to 21-year-olds. We've got our 22 to 24-year-olds. We've got our coffee drinkers, our no coffee drinkers, all the columns we created. Now you can see some red arrows, right? So you can see that, so this is our 18 to 21-year-olds. These are our 22 to 24-year-olds. They are both indexing below 100 for this particular row. So 77, what's 100 minus 77? 33, 33% less likely than the rest of the population to watch A&E. So you read the numbers the same way. It's just that now what you're learning about each of these groups is how likely is it that they watch one of these channels. So you can really put almost anything in the rows, and then you just you read the numbers the same way. Okay, how likely is it the people in the column do the thing in the row, whatever that thing is? You could put coffee brands there. You could put, oh, do you go to coffee shops? Yes, no, all those things you could put there. So we are also seeing here, and this is important, see how in this particular area, there's a bunch of cells that have asterisks. So they're single and double. These are warnings from Simmons. They're basically telling us that these samples are too small. The data is unstable. And the samples are actually right here, right? So this is our 22 to 24-year-olds. Only 23 people out of the entire 25,000, only 23 people out of that group, the 22 to 24-year-olds, only 23 people in that group said that they watched American Heroes channel. I don't know what that is. So it's probably not a very popular channel, which is what this is also telling us. So these samples are too small. You can't make decisions based on 23 people, 25 people. And the difference between the single asterisk and the double is just the sample size. And it's actually, they define this at the end of every crosstab. So here you can see the single asterisk means the cell count is from 31 to 60. And the double means it's below 31. So those are too small. You can't make decisions based on those tiny, tiny little samples. So if you start to see those asterisks in your crosstab, it's also interesting that we start to see more and more of them in the reports we run on things like reading magazines. Fewer and fewer people in every age range are reading magazines, and fewer people are watching cable. So we start to see all these little warnings that, not enough people taking the survey are even choosing these things on the survey. So now what could you do? You could try to find some other evidence that corroborates this, that talks about what channels or what kind of television or what kind of media these groups consume. You would just have to find something else, or you just, you can't rely on those numbers alone. Okay. Questions about the crosstab, putting something else in the rows? So now I can come back to Simmons, and if I click on dictionary, it takes me back here. And maybe you decide you want to redesign your columns, you can do that, right? Now you can go in, you can build columns, you can decide what you want to learn about those people based on how they answer questions, and then, start putting things into rows, and you run your crosstab and you interpret the data. Questions about that? So the other part of Simmons that we subscribe to that I think will be of interest to you is called quick reports. And there's this drop down here under essentials, where right now we're in crosstab. That's where we start. We also subscribe to this part, which is called quick reports. And these reports are predefined by Simmons. Simmons has created these reports. A lot of them are about media consumption. So, and you can just click around to choose one of these reports. But first you have to tell Simmons, okay, which group of people do you want to run this report against? And so what you're going to do is you're going to identify a target. Think of this as one column. So if you have one column from one of your crosstabs and you know that that group of people you're really interested in, then that would be a target to look at in quick reports. So how do we identify your target? You have to open up this little menu that says all. And then there's our dictionary. To open that, you have to click the arrow. If you click the word, it doesn't work. You have to click the arrow. And now you see here's that list that we saw before of all the folders containing questions on the survey. So if we go to beverages, non-alcoholic drinks, we could go to, let's do coffee drinks, bottled or canned. And there was a question, do you drink, yes or no? And then what brand do you drink most often? And here were the choices of the brands. So Starbucks Frappuccino is here, Starbucks Double Shot is here, and then I think plain old other Starbucks is here. So let's actually look at the Starbucks Frappuccino drinkers. And I know it's really tiny, but up above that, the sample is 2015. So 2015 people said that the brand of bottled coffee they drink most often is Starbucks Frappuccino. So we click on target, and now that's the group of people that we're thinking about when we run these reports. So now we could do, for example, simultaneous usage while watching TV. So we choose our quick report and we click the arrow to run it, and here's the report. So now again, remember, this is the people who said that Frappuccino was the brand they drink most often of bottled coffee. So this is what they do while they're also watching TV. The highest one is text on their mobile phone, right? And then the next highest one is visit websites on their mobile phone. So this is just a different perspective of the kind of data that's available in Simmons. So these reports Simmons has created, and you just kind of run it against a different group of people.
Read magazines.
Right, it's so low. Yeah.
And like nobody reads the comics anymore.
Well, why did they put them together? Read magazines / comics? Because you would think comics or graphic novels, like that's a lot different than a magazine in today's world. Like, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Listen to the radio. Look, play games has an asterisk. The sample is too small for, while watching TV, they don't play games at the same time. So this is just one example of the kinds of quick reports that are here. You can export this into Excel. You have the option to do that on the left. Up above the report, there's this button that says dashboard, and that takes you back here. This is the dashboard. So now you could choose a different report. So maybe social media activity profile, click the arrow. And now it's telling us about the social media activity of the people who drink the Frappuccino, the bottled Starbucks Frappuccino. So what device do they use? What website do they visit? Some of the highest indexing attitude statements, okay? And then dashboard takes us back to the dashboard. And I would say dig around in here, like run them all, identify a good target and run all these reports and look at them. And do it for multiple targets, learn about your groups of people. You can, when I identified my target, it was just people who answered that question a certain way. You can combine, you can still do like the and thing. So, for example, Starbucks Frappuccino, and see, it's giving us and now we could go to lifestyle demographics personal, age, and now we can say 18 to 24. So you can build these targets to be a little bit more complex. It's just menu driven. It just looks a little bit different than it did in the crosstab, but it's the same concept, right? So Starbucks drinkers and 18 to 24, the sample is smaller. It's only 312 people. But that would be interesting, go in and run some quick reports against this target and see if it's different than what you saw of all the Frappuccino drinkers. So, questions about quick reports? Anything else? And everything? That was quick.
I've got a few things I want to say before the break, but I don't want to take up your time. You're going to Westchester.
That's all right. Yeah. So, questions? Do you start to see what you can do with this kind of tool? Once you get in there and you really start digging around, I think that you'll really see the possibilities and what you could do. And if you have questions, email me. I'm happy to answer questions. It's a lot of information. If you've never used a tool like this before to take it all in, feel free to email me. I am happy to answer questions. You have my email address and I'm happy to help.
Yeah, I'm going to say a few things, but I don't want to take up your time.
Sure. Do you want me to stop sharing and stop recording or keep recording?
You can stop recording.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.